there is someone who needs a lot of therapy, both physical, psychological, and spiritual, it is the president of Kenya, William Samoei Ruto. He had a very rough day today. He had a 3-day tour in Meru, and he was really heckled at some point. He even lost his cool and threatened those who are heckling him, accusing the opposition of firing goons to heckle him. It did stop there. The courts decided to take him head on. First, the housing levy, a mission that he holds so dearly in his heart, was declared unconstitutional by the Court of Appeal. And then came the much awaited ruling on the Haiti mission. It was declared unconstitutional and illegal. And William Ruto could not believe that all this were happening under his watch. But talking of Haiti mission, it is not only William Ruto who has been dealt a blow. The father and the person who orchestrated all this is none other than the US President, Joe Biden. When we first got wind of the news that William Ruto was on a mission to send 1,000 police officers to the war-ridden Haiti, people questioned who was behind this idea, until Joe Biden praised William Ruto, singled him out among other presidents in one of the UN summits.
We need more voices, more perspectives at the table. The United Nations must continue to preserve peace, prevent conflict, and alleviate human suffering. And we embrace nations stepping up to lead new ways and to seek new breakthroughs on hard issues. For example, on Haiti, the Caribbean community is facilitating a dialogue among Haitian society. I thank President Ruto of I thank him for his willingness to serve as the lead nation of a UN-backed security support mission. I call on the Security Council to authorize this mission now. The people of Haiti cannot wait much longer.
That accolade came in the midst of several opposition from different stakeholders about this mission that was very opaque to send 1,000 policemen to Haiti. Then Joe Biden hurriedly sent a representative and pledged $1 million to back the proposed Kenyan-led multinational force to Haiti. And it was crystal clear. It didn't need any further rocket science to understand who was behind the Haiti mission. This is exactly what the court said in their declaration, that it was illegal and that the National Security Council has got no mandate. It doesn't fall within its purview to send policemen outside the Kenyan boundaries.
It's any act or mission that contravenes the Constitution. In that regard, any purported decision by the National Council or any other state officer to deploy police officers outside Kenya and any other action taken by any other state organ or state officer in furtherance of that decision is invalid and null and void. And these are the final orders that come. Number one, a declaration is hereby issued that sections 107, 108, and 109 of the National Police Service Act, which provide for deployment of police officers outside the country under reciprocal arrangement to reciprocating countries, are constitutional and valid. Two, a declaration is hereby issued that National Security Council has no mandate to deploy police officers outside Kenya under Article 240, Sub-Article 8 of the Constitution or any other law. A declaration That's number 3, is hereby issued that any decision by any state organ or state officer to deploy police officers to Haiti and any other action, any further action or steps taken by any state organ or state officer in furtherance of such a decision contravenes the Constitution and the law and is therefore unconstitutional, illegal, and invalid. An order is hereby issued prohibiting deployment of police officers to Haiti or any other country otherwise than in compliance with Part 14, that is Sections 107 and 108 of the National Police Service Act.
You know, there are several questions that have been asked when the UN approved Kenya to lead a peacekeeping in Haiti. And this was not only a concern from the Kenyan locals. The international body, the human rights, talked about it, and there are very many questions that were raised. And one of them was that the Kenya police is very brutal. And the international human rights mentioned 2 aspects. One, during the COVID-19, the Kenya police dealt with the locals in a very brutal manner. They unleashed brutality, and people were beaten as they were trying to implement the curfew that had been ordered by the former President Uhuru Kenyatta. Under the watch of the international media, the Kenya police rained terror on its citizens. And people were asking, if they could be so brutal to their own countrymen, then how are they going for a peacekeeping that is supposed to be peaceful? It was argued that they were transferring their brutality to another country. Then came the demonstration that was led by the opposition chief Raila Amolo Odinga, when Raila was asking the government and the IEBC to open the servers to settle the opaqueness on who won last year's elections. The Kenya police killed many on the streets, maimed many of them. In Raila's home turf, in Kisumu, they retrieved people from their houses and they mercilessly beat them. And people were asking, how then do you entrust the security of Haiti people in the hands of people, policemen who kill their own countrymen? Make you that when the Kenya police was brutally dealing with the Kenyans, Joe Biden was very quiet. Not even the outspoken Meg Whitman, the US ambassador to Kenya, mentioned anything. In fact, the only thing she said was that the cause for which opposition was running on the streets, the legality of the outcome of the last elections, was the freest in the history of Kenya. And that is what she told Kenyans. But she was very quiet when people were being butchered. So that was the first question. Number 2 was the question of language barrier. Kenya speaks English, while in Haiti, they speak French. And people were asking, experts were asking, why then should Ruto force his soldiers? Because it was going to require quite an elaborate arrangement, maybe to take the soldiers for training to speak French. And I'm not in any way saying that we don't have soldiers who speak French, but then experts believe that it would have been easier for a country, a French-speaking nation, to go and lead the peace mission. Why then force Kenya or force the Kenya police to go and lead the peacekeeping? And people thought that maybe William Ruto had got this appetite for the $100 million that had been pledged by Joe Biden. You know, William Ruto has been on a mission, like he's now the father, the African father of climate change, and he gets a lot of money. I remember at some point he declared a holiday for people to plant trees just to show Joe Biden and the international community that is committed about climate change and doing something to enhance our protection, the protection of our environment. Then there was the insecurity in the country. Even as we speak today, in Baringo, in some parts of northeastern, bandits courts are raining terror, killing, including recently they killed a deputy head teacher in one of the schools in Baringo. And people are asking, why should we take 1,000 soldiers to Haiti, yet we have people who are being killed by bandits? Why can't we deploy the 1,000 soldiers to the vulnerable places where Kenyans are dying? There was no answer for that. These were some of the questions that were becoming stumbling blocks to the Haiti mission. And of course, William Ruto ignored them. Kenyans were never involved. There was no public participation. You know, our constitution demands that before we undertake anything, then Kenyans must be consulted. But you all know that this government has got penchant of doing the public participation as a mere formality, and they ignore the voice of the people. Even though William Ruto himself tells us that the voice of the people is the voice of God. In fact, today he was saying that after the courts declared his housing levy illegal, he was going to ignore the courts and go ahead with his housing mission, saying that the people have spoken. You wonder why they double speak. He's saying that the people want the housing levy, and so he will not obey the courts. Yet the very, very people spoke against the Haiti mission, against the housing levy, against the finance bill 2023. And so there have been questions that Joe Biden and William Ruto ignored, because in their own, as they always do it, they want to force people, like they forced the GMO, they forced the LGBTQ. They are now forcing William Ruto to even sell the Kenyan Seed Corporation, because they want to take over our food industry. The other thing that became a concern is that William Samoei Ruto, the president that Joe Biden gave us, who took oath of office to protect our constitution, decided to threaten people using the sword that he was given, and he declared that he was not going to obey court orders. The international community, in fact, the Commonwealth Lawyers Association spoke against it and warned William Ruto. East African magistrates and lawyers warned against it. Again, Joe Biden was quiet. Meg Whitman was quiet. US was quiet. And people were asking, how is a president who disobeys court orders want to deploy police to Haiti? Basically, that is a president who does not obey the constitution of a country that he leads. Was he going to confine himself to the international treaties and the international laws that guide the peace missions? Because if you cannot obey the laws in your land, then how are you going to obey the international, rules? There was a lot of concern. And so as the court overruled William Ruto, and of course he said that he will appeal against it, Kenyans have got hopes that the appellate court will follow in the footsteps of just what they did today, and they will still declare it illegal, null and void, and very unconstitutional. Our courts must stand firm to show their autonomy, to exercise their independence, because we have become a nation that is ruled from White House. I dare say that. They must do us proud by showing USA that we are an independent country. And don't tell us that you give us aids, because the aids have been the dangling carrot that they give our presidents. And ladies and gentlemen, it is a blow, and many Kenyans are happy that finally our courts have stood their grounds and they have stood against threats from the executive. I don't know what to think, but that is my take.